Good afternoon, Josh Hanson, Head of Digital Project Delivery for John Sisk for the UK.
Press the button or what?
No, I don't think so.
It's on. Hey, good afternoon. Mark Chapman, based out of Australia. I'm the Head of Innovation for the Eleco Group. Do a lot of work with our, our core business, Elecosoft, and work very closely with David over there. I've also from 30 years in construction, so working in project delivery on 4 different continents.
Within Sisk now, it's an absolutely fundamental part of how we go to work. It's been a long road, and I'm pretty sure that Josh might touch on that a little bit further down the line, but we're now 6 or 7 years into an internal investment into 4D planning resource, and the projects just expect it now. We're probably 2-3 cycles of projects with certain team members that now just don't feel comfortable going to work, don't feel comfortable about the risk, don't feel comfortable about the program unless they've visualised it and discussed it with their peers.
Okay. Dave, you want to expand?
Yeah, I'd say just to add to that, I think there's been a bit of a switch where it's gone from being a luxury to a necessity. Project directors that have been through a cycle with a project could be 2-3 years, very sceptical initially, go through the cycle, you show them 2 or 3 golden nuggets which they would have seen on another project which you've resolved early and saved them time or money, and they won't then go to do another project without going through the 4D planning process. So it's very much not seen as a luxury, not a visual, pretty picture. It's very much the process-driven side now.
So just a quick show of hands, are there any of you out in the audience that are currently using 4D planning process in y'all's delivery methodology? All right, so some hands. And what's interesting, everybody knows about 4D and BIM, but only a few hands went up. So my question to you gentlemen, it's so well known. What do you think is the major challenges or barriers preventing other companies from adopting this process?
People. That is the main thing. I think like with any new technology, any new process, especially in construction in particular, it's almost a fear. Like we said, 6 years ago, I remember I went to my first project in Sisk. I was a bit of a punt in the business as a 4D planner. Let's see if it works. First project director I went to, old school construction guy, done it for 40 years, and he went to me, "What's 4D?" I said, it's a better way to plan. He said, "Sounds expensive," and that was the last thing I heard. And then I went back to the MD, I said, "This is the answer I got." He said, "Keep trying, just keep going to site, keep doing what you're doing."
I think it's a very sort of unicorn set of talents. You need to sort of understand 3D design information, coordination, planning and sort of construction methodology, whilst also sort of being a person that's happy to firstly ask the stupid questions, but also challenge the experience in the industry that feel that they know better than what's being kicked out of the 4D model. So very, very few people sort of tick all 3 of those boxes, and I think that is a challenge in bringing through new people and just education generally, but also challenging that sort of top 20% of the industry to be a bit more forthcoming. And I think when we were talking about this previously, there's something to be learned on both sides of the fences there. From the senior members of the industry can learn from the new technologies and processes that are coming through, but equally those people that are just starting out in the industry need that construction understanding and just generally understanding construction.
So there was a few hands that went up. Of those of you already doing it, are there others in the audience that are not doing it that are currently trying to get this launched in their business? So leads us to the next question. We understand there's barriers. We understand there's problems. So let's focus on some of the solutions that specifically you guys have used, and Mark, maybe you can expound on, that made it a little bit easier, right? So you were an early adopter, so you basically just started. So talk a little bit about that journey and what helped you get there.
Yeah, we touched on the fear side. There's fear on both sides. So there's fear from the new young techie person that's coming on board to try and push this. They're scared to go and talk to the old grumpy construction professionals that don't really want to know. But then it's fear from the older school guys that have always done it well, done it properly, never had a problem, some problems, that are quite resistant to change and the technology. But once you've broken that fear and broken that barrier, which I think the best resolution on this front is persistence. It's talking to them on a level. It's understanding where things have gone wrong in the past and where those nuggets can be solved through what you're trying to do. So yeah, persistence and ensuring that it's part of the process. I think typically with a lot of 4D work that's been done in the past, it's a pretty picture. Or can you do us some of those images that you've done before? We've got away from that. We were talking to someone in the room a few minutes ago, just saying we very rarely now produce outputs. So we very rarely produce images or videos. A lot of the time, we're asked to go to site, get the 4D model up on the screen, talk through the sequence week by week as part of a workshop. It's almost embedded into the process. And I think once you've cracked that, and it's no longer seen as a fluffy Hollywood-style image that goes in front of the client, and it's seen as something that adds value, you're winning straight away.
Yeah. So Liam and I were talking actually prior to this, and I'd like you to expand on. You mentioned it earlier, like there's mutual respect of young professionals coming into the industry versus some of the others that have been around for a while. That maybe they're not as opposed to the adoption, but maybe it's the approach. So I think we talked a little bit about that. I want you to kind of expand on the respect, the approach, and how that you can see those working mutually together to help.
Again, I think that comes down to the people aspect, definitely, and just understanding and not coming straight in with the model and the complexity and the technology and the process, but sitting down to understand and get to know the person. So it's an odd one because you really need to understand the risk, the sort of concerns that person has, or really what's keeping them awake at night, and target that as a start point. Don't go in and try and sort of blanket 4D everything across the project, and yeah, it looks great, but it doesn't really solve or answer any of the things that's keeping them awake at night. I think go in, find that weak point. What's really worrying you? Let's take a look at that. Get them on side, and then it'll just grow naturally from there.
So it's process. So it's not only the people, but helping understand their process, explaining your process, and then together kind of forming doing a better process.
I don't think 4D needs to be looked at straight away at project level for anybody that's looking to sort of deploy 4D. Some of the best work that we've done is really intricate pieces of work within a single room. Quite focused and still very valuable.
Nice.
Although when you first start doing 4D as an early adopter, the temptation is there to 4D.
Yeah.
So, thanks you chiming in on that one, Mark. So the next question is actually for you. Looking at the process, is there anything that's fundamentally wrong with the way that we're looking to implement 4D today? And is there something that you would do differently?
Right, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the old version of phones that still had cables going to the wall, right? They still did the job that they were intended to do. But the phones that we have now are far more capable, and new workflows are open to us, right? So the 4D process that the industry recognizes at the moment has been around for 15 years-ish. I think I started 2009 with Synchro. And like it's not wrong. It's just that the value doesn't arrive at the time that you need it, right? So let's go for a typical tender process, for example. Most of the planning has already been done. That collaborative piece with the team, putting your plan together, getting your Gantt chart set up so you're ready to load a model, that takes 70, 80% of a tender process. Yeah. So it's during that time that the 4D is useful, but you only get a short window at the back end to maybe do some optimization, maybe discover a few errors that need correcting. So yeah, it's not that it's wrong, it's just that hit of value that you can get from 4D doesn't come along early enough yet, in my opinion.
Yeah, we keep hearing the phrase within CISC as a business that it's evolution of traditional techniques. So the fear shouldn't be that it's some techie that's going to totally change the way you're working. With any platform that you're using for 4D, if you just close that window that's got the modelling, it's your typical Gantt chart that you'd look at anyway. So we push it that It's almost giving everybody on the team ownership of the program, commitment to the program, rather than it just being something that the planner produces and everyone else has comments on it. It brings everybody collaboratively together to comment on it.
There is, sorry, David, just to jump in. There is one other problem as well. So as an industry, we're not fantastic at innovating our processes, right? They stay the same for a very long period of time. Planning, scheduling hasn't really changed for decades. So if the current 4D process becomes baked into our systems, comes baked into our specifications, thou shalt do 4D in this way, then it does run the risk of limiting innovation in terms of how the process can add more value going forward. So I'd say that's a bit of a weakness.
Sorry, my mic keeps dropping. So, we're looking at, we've talked about a little bit about people and about process. We talked mostly about internal people. And so I'm curious your experience, because a lot of it does rely on how we're getting data from external sources. So is there anything that you guys would say is key to that relationship as well? If you're working with an outside firm as opposed to doing it in-house, like how do y'all manage that relationship, make sure they're giving you what y'all need to be effective?
I suppose it's just making sure you set out what you want again early in the process. A lot of what we do is dependent on good data. It's like not just 4D, like anything. If you're receiving good data, you can produce and do better things with the data. So similarly with SIS, we manage various subcontractors. We specify when we get into contract with subcontractors what we want in terms of level of detail from models, programs. We want to see a certain level of detail. And again, there could be that fear factor in there, just purely because it might catch them out. Because again, we're validating what they're giving us, they're building for us, and we're delivering that on behalf of the client. So there's probably two prongs there where you've got to specify the detail you want to get the value, but sometimes the detail can show a bit too much, and it creates that fear again. So it's 4D almost is the glue that brings that collaboration together to get rid of that fear, because everyone's owning it. Do you know what I mean? It's not just the subbies information coming to us and we're validating it. It's everyone as a cohort looking at it together. So
yeah, I guess the advice I give to everybody, if they've never started before, is work out the why. Like work out what value you're trying to get out of it, why you're doing this, rather than just launching straight into looking at everything from 50 mil above the floor. Look at it from 30,000 feet first.
Yeah, I think as Josh and Mark have sort of alluded to, that front end, really 4D at CISC, it's a planning and project management tool, and the value that we see comes when the model is put in the hands of the site operations team. That front end, and I've got a slide in the presentation at 2:00, but that shameless plug. That front end is really non-value add that we find to our construction teams, and that is something that we're really focusing on, like you say, with our external consultants, designers, trying to align model breakdown structures, work breakdown structures, trying to really compress that front end of modelling around site logistics, temporary works, so we can get the model into the hands of the people that can add the value quicker. So yeah, really just trying to pull that front end in so we can get to the good bit.
Fantastic. So I know that this next question kind of leads to some of the things we already asked. So I'll kind of ask in a little different way. But it's 40 is more of an afterthought than a forethought, right? So if we can get that mindset of it becoming something of the forethought, how do you see 4D planning changing the landscape of construction? Mark, I'll ask you that one first, and then you kind of.
Yeah. Okay. Too many things bouncing around my head right now. So I guess I've been in a fortunate position for the last few years where I've managed to, I guess, build a network of really smart people that have allowed, I guess, us to pioneer and try new ways of working, new processes, not just using new tools, but fundamental new processes. And we've managed to unlock some value that actually surprised us, I think. So I think 4D has the potential to basically help fix the data mess that we have as an industry. So we have lots of data. Everyone loves data. Data is the new oil, whatever everyone says. But we have a lot of unstructured data, and a lot of that data isn't as reliable as it could be, and not very much of it is hooked back to a model. So I think once I think there were a lot of hands that went up just then. So most people in the room will understand that 4D or 3D has two types of value, right? So it's the stuff that you can see, the geometry, and it's the metadata, right, that you can't see. All those metadata fields that are populated with lots of really useful machine-readable structured data. And I think the processes that we've been pioneering over the last few years and trying out have the potential to not only completely transform the planning process, but give the industry the best shot at getting to the best data set that it can do to enable things like AI in the future to be used to help us manage that complexity, size, problem that we have in construction.
I want to expand on that. And I'm going to ask you a little bit further question on kind of what Mark's, the data piece, right? So I know that there's a lot of talk around the industry about getting AI and all that stuff. So has CISP, have y'all seen an improvement the way you guys are collecting and being able to have that data for your projects? And do you think that this positions you guys in a good position to start looking at the other future tech in the company?
Yeah, I think CISC as a business have always collected data reasonably well, fairly uncontrolled, but reasonably well. Even in terms of planning, we've done like benchmark studies, and we've got different rates for different projects, and these are all stored somewhere centrally for people to access. But I think with newer solutions that we're talking about now, the different APIs that talk to each other with different platforms, we've got more control over how we interrogate the data. So, especially from a 4D perspective, Liam will probably expand on this, but we're trying to look at trends from our 4D models so that, I don't know, if you've got a project in Birmingham, hence the accent, in Birmingham, tight logistics, certain value, certain height, you do another project in 5 years that have got those 4 or 5 different attributes, and you've got all the data stored somewhere centrally that can be interrogated to give you stuff or a certain element of list of risks that are applied on that project. You can quite quickly then apply those same risks to this new project, and it's all there and accessible to talk to different platforms. Would you add?
Yeah, no, I'll probably just echo that. I think where we're at now is very much a discovery stage. We've got, as you say, some sort of prototype workflows to start looking at the trends, and really, because the work that goes into these models, a lot of it is, we call them sort of hard and soft benefits, I suppose. There's the measurable stuff where you find a hard clash in time, where you've got, I don't know, a candidate going through a mass climber, whatever it might be. But there's all the soft benefits as well, and the little things that you find out along the way that smooth stuff out. They're not big ticket items. They're not going to change the sort of the direction of the project, but they're helping everybody to sleep at night, and everybody just understands a little bit better. And I think, as Josh said, we've been able to interrogate more of that data and bring it to the surface. That's only going to improve on, as I touched on, sort of where we focus our efforts within 4D. So, as Josh said, where we've got a project of a certain type, we can go in and we know we've had problems here, here, and here. We really focus 60% of our effort there, and then we can kind of backfill everything else with some just general sequence checking and things like that. So it's just trying to be smarter, I think, and work smart rather than hard.
Yeah, I like I said, I alluded earlier to some of that pioneering that we've been doing around the process. And if I can talk specifically about, I guess, some of the examples that we're seeing coming through, I guess just to bring it to life so that it's, it sounds a bit more real. But we've got use cases out there in the industry now of people planning complex projects in days, not weeks. And that, yeah, sure, that saves you a little bit of time on the planning process, but that's not where the value is, right? So it gives you longer to optimize, work with teams, and do that stuff on the screen that you talked about earlier, where you're talking through the sequences and coming up with that best sequence. So that not only de-risks your project delivery, de-risks what you're signing up to as a contractor in terms of size of risk pot, and arguably, I mean, most of us will already had safety benefits when we're using 4D, but it's like you can have a big impact on safety on a project. So it gives you more time to add a lot more value.
So Josh, I'm going to leave this last one for you. Is what would you tell your younger self about getting the 4D process? If you go back and right before you started, what would be the one thing you would tell yourself to do?
Don't be scared. get involved earlier, talk and get in front of as many people as you can with what you're trying to do, and just keep pushing the positive message. I think that's the main thing, because you will come across a lot of people in the industry that will push back, say they don't need it, say it's not worth it, it's an extra add-on. But if I was to go back in time for when I started out at Synchro, what was it, 12 years ago? 12 years ago, probably the best decision I ever made was getting into 4D. And even back then, it was a bit of a punt for me. Didn't know what it was, knew a bit about it, but wasn't, entirely clued up. And it adds real value now. Like we talked about the process, everything else, and I'm like, it's really proud for me to be able to say it's been so successful in Cisco as a business as well.
You stole all the good ones.
Just do it. Yeah. Just do it.
I'd probably say just don't take it personally, which I think builds on what Josh has said. Sort of, people are challenging what they don't know. It's not a personal challenge, and I think take your time to understand the people, because that's the biggest part of the process. Yeah, I'd say that's probably the summary for me, and just keep at it.
Yeah. Mark?
Build a network, build a support network. So one of the barriers to adoption with 4D early on was there was no back then, like 3D ecosystem support system around construction for managing, creating, editing 3D data.
No.
So a lot of the early pioneers, and I know these guys will have spent a lot more time in models probably than they had, in the 4D solution.
Yeah.
So build that network. That you're always going to hit against a stumble. You're always going to hit against a problem. You're always going to find models that haven't had that metadata coded properly.
Yeah.
Build a network.
Yeah, fantastic.